We begin with breaking news tonight from the Gulf Coast. Hurricane Hannah slamming into the Texas shore, winds of 90 miles an hour. The first hurricane of the season in the Atlantic, striking south of Corpus Christi. Strong winds and flooding rains, storm surge across more than 100 miles of the Texas coastline. In Port Mansfield, Texas, the wind ripping buildings apart. You see it right there. And take a look at the radar, the dangerous eye wall moving inland at this hour. ABC senior meteorologist Rob Marciano is right there. He leads us off in Armstrong, Texas tonight near the eye of the storm. Rob, good evening.
Hi, Tom. We were afraid this storm would strengthen quickly. It has done just that. Hurricane Hannah now making landfall as a 90-mile-per-hour Category 1 storm, and we are in the thick of it. The eye of the storm is going to be directly overhead moments from now when it will be completely calm, but right now it is anything but that.
Tonight, Hurricane Hannah slamming ashore in South Texas, ripping the roof off this building. The Category 1 storm pounding areas south of Corpus Christi with 90-mile-per-hour winds, flooding rains, and dangerous storm surge. Thousands without power across the area.
This is one of 2 FEMA domes at the local high school that not only is a storm shelter, but also doubles as a COVID-19 patient overflow.
Officials warning residents to stay indoors.
We all know how to stay at home now. Well, this is Mother Nature's stay-at-home order for all of us.
The Emergency Operations Center activated.
Any hurricane is an enormous challenge. This challenge is complicated and made even more severe, seeing that it is sweeping through an area that is the most challenged area in the state for COVID-19.
The Rio Grande Valley, one of the hardest hit portions of the state in this pandemic, now dealing with a hurricane.
Even with COVID and social distancing and having to wear masks, you will go get people out of their homes.
We will go get people. If you don't got a mask, we're going to give you a mask. If you don't got sanitizer, we're going to get you sanitizer. There's absolutely no reason why anybody should be out there in harm's way.
All right, Rob joins us now from there in Armstrong, Texas. And Rob, Hannah has officially now come ashore?
It has, the first hurricane of the season, and it's the first landfall of the season as well. We're not even close to the peak of it. We've had winds gust over 80 miles an hour measured, and we still have several more hours to get through. This is a slow-moving storm, and it's not small, unfortunately. Here's what it looks like on the radar. As you can see, that well-defined eye now lumbering ashore about 30 miles wide. Very thick and intense eye wall, which we're in right now with heavy rain and wind, and a lot of flooding rain potentially with this as it heads ashore tonight. It will take its time weakening. It will take a while for that. It will bring flooding rains to the Rio Grande Valley with up to a foot of rain potentially tomorrow. All right, let's get to Douglas. Unfortunately, they have just hoisted hurricane warnings for Oahu now, as this storm likely to remain Category 1 status as it gets to the islands tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. So all the hazards are included there with flooding rains, dangerous surf, and flash flooding for the island of Oahu. Tough 2 days for 2 states. Tom?
Tracking 2 hurricanes in real time. Rob Marciano, you and your team.
Hurricane Hannah has made landfall as a Category 1 storm in South Texas. This is a live look at Port Aransas, where you can see there the beach is pretty much underwater as winds have pushed up a 4 to 5 foot storm surge. And near there, areas of Corpus Christi are underwater, and thousands of people are experiencing power outages as winds pick up. In this video, you can see the water moving over someone's dock as it continues to get higher and higher. Further south, reports of damage on Padre Island. Bob Hall Pier, one of the most popular piers in the Texas Gulf Coast area, has partially collapsed. The Nueces County judge said that she plans to survey the damage there tomorrow and added that the county will do everything in its power to rebuild it. Meteorologist Jeff Ray has been busy tracking Hannah and its impacts for us. Jeff, I told you earlier that my mom, sister, and nephew are currently in Aransas Pass. That's close to where that Port A beach was underwater. And they've been on storm watch all day, but this area and the people there are no stranger to strong storms. In fact, you were also saying that the last hurricane to hit Texas impacted many of these same towns just a few years ago.
Yeah, it was Harvey. Of course, Harvey stalled out and produced incredible rains, record rains. But let's talk about Hannah. It has now come on shore with its 90-mile-per-hour winds. Yes, it continued to strengthen through the course of the day and was still strengthening as it hit landfall. This is Port Mansfield. You can see the damage that is caused by hurricane force winds. And unfortunately, these hurricane force winds will be going on for most of the evening in this area, in areas just to the north as well. So let me show you again. There's the latest at 6 p.m. advisory. Hannah's
There used to be a path where Wuhan farmer Zai Guotao now walks. But last week's torrential rains changed that, flooding and polluting his crayfish and crab ponds.
The coronavirus this year already impacted my business. When the outbreak was contained, I worked really hard to recover business. But just before the harvest time, this flood came. I've lost so much.
Almost all of Zai's stock died. In just a few days, he lost more than a year's worth of income. He says 2020 has so far been a year of disasters. The coronavirus crisis forced his farm on the outskirts of Wuhan to close for much of the first half of the year. Infections have eased, but for the city's 11 million residents, flooding poses a new threat.
6 months after Wuhan was first put into lockdown because of the coronavirus outbreak, it's back on high alert, this time due to flooding. Parts of the city are already submerged, and the government has ordered emergency reinforcements of the Yangtze River.
More than 90 rivers in the region have breached flood warning levels. More heavy rain is expected. While some are worried about the future, all Zhao Lei can think about is the past. Her father died suddenly and without diagnosis in early February. Despite having symptoms of COVID-19, a fever and breathing difficulties, the authorities never formally acknowledged him as a victim.
Remembering what happened to my father that day, it was so tough. Taking him to the hospital, there was no car, no help. He was in the hospital waiting room. Then, a few minutes later, he stopped breathing. Then a doctor came and told my mom he passed away.
The government says about 3,800 people in Wuhan died after contracting coronavirus, with 50,000 infected. Beijing says it successfully contained the outbreak, but its source remains unknown. World Health Organization officials say they've launched an investigation, but the UN agency isn't saying what progress is being made. While the virus crisis in Wuhan is over, at least for now, for Zhao Lei, the scars remain.
My life has completely changed. I don't think it can ever go back to normal.
Zai Guotao is grateful his family survived the outbreak. He says he's now trying to shift his focus from counting his losses to making do with what's left. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera, Wuhan.
没这么大的水，这次水特别大。那把手呢，它一冒水出来，它就奔了高的水大了，高了，水位高了，然后它就这样奔出来，奔着那水又我来这就赶我们就很慌，水到地高头来，我在这。先这个水库，因为我们这里都是旱的，带旱了，就灾区啊。因为我们这里都是受旱的，所以乡里头的、县里头的，我们就收一个水库，保证我们这里头的生活啊，用叫田啊，也靠天上楼宇的。
哪个水库都有50年了，你搞个房子50年的也会有危险。如果你不加固，你不去防护的，你受不了。
The power of nature on display with fierce storms rolling across New York and New Jersey, breaking the summer swelter after 5 ferocious days of 90-degree-plus temperatures. The heat wave broke in with pounding rain, whipping winds. It was enough to flood streets, stall cars, and in at least 2 places, lightning strikes starting fires.
The staple of this stately South Ozone Park, Queens church, struck by lightning, drawing neighbors outside to watch as firefighters tried valiantly to save this house of God.
And in Cypress Hills, a Brooklyn home's attic ignited by a bolt of lightning. Firefighters again at the scene to douse the flames. The progress of the heavy rains and dark storm clouds captured by Pix 11 and viewer cameras across the tri-state as it overtook the skyscrapers of Gotham, pounded the pavement in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and flooded the streets of Hoboken.
It's an ongoing issue in Hoboken with the floods. Every time it rains, we get this issue.
Back out here at the Spirit and Truth Church, you can see how firefighters had to break out the window. Parishioners are going to be greeted with a lot of damage to this church, but fortunately firefighters were able to save it. Meanwhile, thousands of people are waking up across the area with no electricity and, more importantly, no air conditioning as the summer swelter again settles over us. Every place from Westchester to Long Island, the 5 boroughs in New Jersey impacted with thousands of outages each. This heat wave, according to meteorologist Byron Miranda, is going to continue. Reporting live from South Ozone Park, Queens, I'm Kirsten Cole, Pix 11 News.
And good evening. Thanks for being with us on this Friday night. I'm Tom Yamas in for David. And as we come to the end of another week, the coronavirus is raging and on the move. This week, 13 states saw a record number of cases, 15 states a record of hospitalizations, and 7 states a record number of deaths. The death toll from the coronavirus, take a look, up 20% from a week ago. More than 145,000 lives have been lost. The Sun Belt, now the hardest hit, but the surge is moving north. Georgia setting a single-day record of more than 4,800 cases. Maryland and Virginia seeing cases rise after declining in June. But Florida remains the epicenter. Cases topping 400,000. More than 12,000 new cases just today. So many cases in Arizona, some COVID patients are being transferred to hospitals in New Mexico. Hospitalizations in Texas are at a record high. South of San Antonio, crematoriums in Hidalgo County have a 2-week waiting list. 24 hours after President Trump conceded that some hotspot cities may need to delay reopening schools, Houston saying their schools will stay closed at least until after Labor Day. The CDC issuing new guidance insisting COVID poses relatively little risk to kids. And as more governors impose statewide mask mandates this week, McDonald's is the latest business to require face coverings at its 14,000 locations nationwide beginning August 1st. We have a lot to get to tonight, and ABC's Victor Oquendo leads us off in Florida.
Tonight, with the nation seeing another day of more than 1,000 deaths, a 20% increase week to week, the nation's top infectious disease doctor Anthony Fauci, considering his age, saying he wouldn't be dining out or flying on an airplane, and that hard-hit states should halt their reopenings.
You certainly have to call a pause and maybe even a backing up a bit.
White House Task Force Coordinator Dr. Deborah Birx comparing the outbreaks in Florida, Texas, and California to the Northeast early on in the pandemic.
What we have right now are essentially 3 New Yorks.
Tonight, 30 states reporting increases in daily deaths. California setting another record for a second day in a row. Cases are still skyrocketing in Florida, more than 300,000 new infections in just the past month. More than 50 Florida hospitals have no available ICU beds. Doctors suiting up in PPE.
More on the news of a potential COVID-19 vaccine this morning. Joined now by the chair of the UK Vaccine Task Force, Kate Bingham. Hello to Ms. Bingham. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. This sounds exciting.
It is really cool. Good morning.
Tell me more about it. It all sounds like good news. We have to temper our enthusiasm, or should we just all get the streamers out?
No, we have to be very cautious because there has never been a vaccine against a coronavirus, and there may never be one. What we have been tasked to do is to protect the UK population against COVID-19 through vaccination, and do so as quickly as we can. And the announcements this morning show that the UK is absolutely at the forefront of global efforts to source and develop vaccines from across the world, across a range of different technologies.
It's scary, isn't it, when you hear there might never be a vaccine against it? I don't think there's one against SARS, is there?
No, and there's no vaccine against malaria, against HIV, and these are diseases we know well. So there is no expectation that this definitely can be done, but the early data that we're seeing is definitely encouraging.
More trials in the works as well, isn't there? There's not just the one. Are they working collaboratively together?
Yes, so there's 23 vaccines in clinical trials around the world. There has been enormous collaboration and cooperation, both from academia, from industry, from governments. It's incredibly impressive, and people have been working at unprecedented speed. So it is an exciting time, and if you think about it, the virus was only identified at the beginning of the year, and we've now got 23 vaccines in trials. Oxford has vaccinated over 9,000 people with their vaccine. So this is really quite remarkable.
Are we obligated, I should say, to share our information, to share our potential vaccines around the world?
One of the goals of the Vaccine Task Force is both to find vaccines for the UK, but also to ensure that any successful vaccine is distributed across the globe so that anybody who is at risk of COVID infection is vaccinated. So we are not pursuing a strategy of vaccine nationalism. We are recognising that this is a global pandemic, and we need to ensure that the globe and all those who need it are vaccinated.
OK, so it's a breakthrough today. What happens next?
The trials continue. So what we have announced today is that we've secured rights to 2 new vaccines in addition to the vaccines being developed by Oxford University and Imperial. And those vaccines will continue to progress through clinical trials. They have to show that they are both safe, and they have to show that they are protective, either that they can reduce mortality, or ideally and ultimately we want to show that they can protect people from even getting infected in the first place. And those trials basically will continue until we have a result.
How worried are you about espionage, people trying to hack the systems to steal the work that you've done?
We've had continuous support from the cybersecurity teams that we have not been hacked. We're very alert to the fact that this is potentially happening, but I'm not concerned that this is going to disrupt in any way what we're doing.
Has it been? I mean, we've heard a lot about Russia trying to access what our brilliant scientists are doing. You've obviously been made aware of that. Have you actually seen it firsthand, as it were?
I haven't seen the hacking. I've had lots of conversations with the cyber security teams. Yes.
Okay. As you said, next steps mean that it's not yet a vaccine, but you are going to take it further to see whether or not we could go for herd immunity in the fullness of time with this vaccine. But I was reading an article this morning that suggested, Kate, that 25% of the population would not be interested in having a vaccine. That's presumably because they're anxious about potentially.
These protests are a problem for President Vladimir Putin. Demonstrators in the city of Khabarovsk have marched every day for more than 2 weeks, demanding the governor of the region, Sergei Frugal, is released from prison. The businessman turned politician was arrested on July the 9th and flown to Moscow. He is accused in the murder of business rivals 15 years ago, charges he denies. This city in Russia's far east, near the border with China, is more than 6,000 kilometers from Moscow. But now it's turned into an unexpected hub of anti-government protests.
People are offended. I think people are marching out on the streets because their vote to elect the governor in the 2018 election has been taken away.
Forgal supporters say the accusations are politically motivated.
We've had enough. We elected the governor and we want to be heard and decide ourselves what to do with him. Bring him here for a fair and open trial and we'll decide whether to convict him or not.
Putin officially fired Forgal on Monday and appointed a replacement, fueling further mistrust in the region. The president's United Russia Party isn't popular here. The protests reflect anger at what many see as out-of-touch politicians imposing policies from Moscow. The timing of the arrest is also raising questions. Earlier this month, President Putin oversaw a controversial vote potentially allowing him to remain in power for another 16 years. Critics say Putin waited until he'd won the vote before sacking the governor from the opposing Liberal Democratic Party. Protests are relatively rare in Putin's tightly controlled Russia, and the coronavirus pandemic is further complicating the Kremlin's response. It's not the type of attention Putin is looking for, but protesters in the city of 600,000 people say the marches will continue until the governor is released. Katia Lopez-Odoyan, Al Jazeera.
An aggressive speech from the U.S. Secretary of State, likely to further ratchet up tensions with China, which he branded as a threat to the free world.
We, the freedom-loving nations of the world, must induce China to change, just as President Nixon wanted. We must induce China to change in more creative and assertive ways because Beijing's actions threaten our people and our prosperity. Securing our freedoms from the Chinese Communist Party is the mission of our time. And America is perfectly positioned to lead it because our founding principles give us that opportunity.
In his speech, Pompeo also referenced the case of Tan Juan, a researcher charged with lying to U.S. authorities about her military ties. The FBI says she's being harbored at her country's consulate in San Francisco, an allegation leveled in a Monday court filing, and part of a broader deterioration in U.S.-China relations in recent weeks. Earlier Thursday, a Chinese government spokesperson slammed the U.S. for ordering the shutdown of China's consulate in Houston, Texas.
美方要求中方关闭驻休斯顿总领馆，严重违反国际法和国际关系基本原则，严重违反中美领事条约的有关规定，严重破坏中美关系。这是在拆中美两国人民友好的桥梁。
Washington has ordered the consulate to close by Friday, arguing it to center for economic espionage and for stealing scientific research, allegations that China has called malicious slander and that have driven speculation Beijing may close a U.S. consulate in response.